You'll vacate this apartment by the end of the week, ma'am. I don't care if you have kids. The rent has gone up and you didn't pay. The manager's loud voice echoed through the lobby, drawing everyone's attention. The woman, holding her 3 frightened little girls, felt her face burn with shame as he continued to scold her. Little did he know that the arrival of a familiar figure was about to turn his world upside down. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Well, if it isn't Ms. Mitchell, who thinks rules don't apply to her? Douglas Parker's voice echoed through the lobby. Let me make an example here for everyone. This is what happens when you can't pay what you owe. Sarah Mitchell froze near the entrance of Oakwood Apartments. 6 other tenants stood watching, their faces a mixture of shock and discomfort. Her cheeks burned with humiliation as Douglas, the building manager, waved a paper in the air. Ms. Mitchell's bank balance as of yesterday was $127.14, Douglas announced, reading from her extension request form. 3 late payments in the last year, and now she wants special treatment for the rent increase. Sarah's hands trembled. Please stop. That information is private. Nothing is private when you're trying to live somewhere you can't afford, Douglas sneered. The lobby door opened behind Sarah. Her heart sank as she turned to see her 10-year-old twin sons, Ethan and Noah, standing there in their school backpacks, eyes wide with confusion. Mom? Noah's voice was small. What's happening? Douglas smiled coldly. Your mother is teaching you an important lesson about responsibility. You have exactly 48 hours to pay in full or vacate. And don't expect any references for your next place. 3 days earlier, Sarah had been serving breakfast at Rosie's Diner in West Haven, Connecticut. Despite waking up at 4:30 that morning after working her night job until midnight, she maintained a warm smile for her customers. Here's your Denver omelet, extra cheese, she said, placing the plate in front of Mr. Jenkins, a regular. Thanks, Sarah. How are those boys of yours? He asked. Growing too fast. Ethan won his math competition last week, and Noah is trying out for baseball. She moved quickly between tables, calculating tips in her head. Every dollar counted since the divorce 3 years ago. Richard had moved to California to pursue his tech startup dreams, leaving her to raise the twins alone. His child support payments came regularly but weren't enough to cover all their expenses. When her shift ended at 2 o'clock, Sarah rushed home to check on the twins. Their apartment was small but clean, a 2-bedroom unit in Oakwood Apartments that had been their home for 5 years. We finished our homework, Ethan announced proudly as she entered. Both boys sat at the kitchen table, textbooks open. And I made us sandwiches, Noah added. Sarah kissed their foreheads. What would I do without you two? She sorted through the mail and froze when she saw an official notice from Oakwood Management. Opening it, her stomach dropped. Effective the first day of next month, monthly rent will increase by 40% to reflect current market rates. No exceptions. Sarah did the math quickly. Their rent would jump from $950 to $1,330. With utilities, food, and other expenses, this was impossible. Mom? Are you okay? Ethan asked, noticing her expression. Sarah forced a smile. Everything's fine. Just boring grown-up stuff. That night, after tucking the twins into bed, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, working her customer service job. Between calls, she created a spreadsheet of their finances. Even cutting out every non-essential expense, the numbers didn't work. The next morning, Sarah knocked on Douglas Parker's office door. Come in, he called. Douglas sat behind his desk, a short man with thinning hair he carefully combed over. He wore an expensive-looking watch that seemed out of place with his discount store suit. Mr. Parker, I need to discuss the rent increase, Sarah began. Ah, Miss Mitchell. I was wondering when you'd show up. He didn't offer her a seat. This increase is very sudden. Is there any way to implement it gradually? Or maybe I could get a few extra months at the current rate? Douglas leaned back. Rules are rules, Ms. Mitchell. Everyone got the same notice. But 40% at once is market rates, he interrupted. This building has been undervalued for years. The owner wants proper returns. Sarah took a deep breath. I've never missed a payment. I've been a good tenant for 5 years. I'm just asking for some flexibility. You want special treatment because you're a single mother? Douglas smirked. Do you know how many sob stories I hear every day? This isn't a sob story, Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I'm requesting a reasonable accommodation while I adjust my finances. Douglas sighed dramatically. Fine. Fill out this extension request form. I can't promise anything. Sarah took the form, noticing it asked for detailed financial information including bank balances and income sources. Thank you, she said, though the words tasted bitter. Don't thank me yet, Douglas replied. Between us, you might want to start looking elsewhere. This neighborhood is improving, and frankly, some people just can't keep up. That afternoon, Sarah sat in her neighbor Tanya Rivera's apartment, the extension form completed on the table between them. He's such a jerk, Tanya said, pouring coffee into Sarah's mug. He knows most people can't afford this increase. I've called everywhere, Sarah said. My sister in Boston only has a couch to offer, but she can't take the twins. I've looked at other apartments, but everything in decent school districts costs even more. What about Richard? Could he help? Tanya asked carefully. Sarah shook her head. He sends what the court ordered, but he's wrapped up in his startup. Last I heard, he was working 18-hour days trying to get investors. Tanya reached for her purse. I've got $300 saved. It's yours. I can't take your money, Sarah protested. Yes, you can. That's what friends do. Sarah's eyes welled up. Even with your help, it's not enough. I need to come up with almost $400 more by the first day of next month. You'll figure it out, Tanya assured her. You always do. Over the next 2 days, Sarah called relatives, looked into emergency assistance programs, and even listed her mother's old jewelry online. She picked up extra shifts at the diner, leaving the twins alone more than she wanted to. On the morning of the first day of the month, Sarah delivered the extension request form to Douglas's office. He wasn't there, so she slid it under his door with a note requesting urgent consideration. When she returned from her diner shift that afternoon, Douglas was waiting in the lobby with several other tenants. And that's when the public humiliation began. Now, with her sons witnessing her shame, Sarah fought back tears. Ethan, Noah, go upstairs, she said firmly. But Mom, Ethan started. Now please. The twins reluctantly headed for the elevator. Once the doors closed, Sarah faced Douglas. You had no right to share my private financial information. Mrs. Wilson, an elderly tenant who had lived in the building for 30 years, stepped forward. That was completely inappropriate, Mr. Parker. Stay out of this, Douglas snapped. Kevin Torres, a college student from the 3rd floor, spoke up. Pretty sure that violates privacy laws, actually. Douglas waved dismissively. Sue me. Meanwhile, 48 hours, Ms. Mitchell. The clock is ticking. As Sarah rode the elevator up to her apartment, her mind raced. How would she explain this to the twins? Where would they go? The small family photo in her wallet, taken before Richard left, seemed to mock her. Their smiling faces from a time when stability wasn't a daily struggle. The elevator doors opened. She could hear Ethan and Noah arguing inside their apartment. We can't leave. All my friends are here, Noah was shouting. Mom will figure it out, Ethan responded, though his voice lacked conviction. Sarah took a deep breath and reached for the doorknob. She had 48 hours to find a solution. For now, she needed to be strong for her boys. She had no idea that across town, Richard Mitchell had just landed at the airport, returning to West Haven after 3 years away. Richard Mitchell stared at the departure board at the airport. After 3 long years in California, he had finally returned to West Haven. His tech startup had been acquired for millions, but success felt empty. The only thing that mattered now was reconnecting with his sons. Inside apartment 27 at Oakwood Apartments, Sarah locked the door behind her and faced her confused twins. "Mom, why was that man saying those things about us?" Noah asked, his bottom lip quivering. Sarah knelt down, pulling both boys into a hug. "Mr. Parker was upset about some grown-up money problems, but don't worry, I'll figure this out." "Are we going to be homeless?" Ethan's voice was barely audible. "No, absolutely not," Sarah said firmly, though her mind raced with uncertainty. "We have options. I just need to make some calls." After the twins went to bed, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her phone and a notepad. Her sister in Boston couldn't help. Her parents in Florida were living on a fixed income. Every friend she called either couldn't afford to help or had their own financial struggles. At midnight, she heard a soft knock. Opening the door, she found Tanya. "The boys asleep?" Tanya whispered. Sarah nodded, stepping into the hallway. "I've called everyone. No one can help enough to make a difference." "Douglas had no right to share your private information," Tanya said. "Kevin from 305 thinks it might be illegal." "Kevin, the law student?" "Yes. He wants to talk to you tomorrow, and he's not the only one. Mrs. Wilson is furious about how Douglas treated you." Sarah ran her fingers through her hair. "I appreciate the support, but unless someone has $400 to lend me by tomorrow evening, it doesn't really matter. Just talk to them, okay?" Tanya squeezed her arm. "You're not alone in this." The next morning, Sarah left for her early shift at Rosie's Diner. She'd barely slept, and her eyes burned with exhaustion. Her boss, Rick, noticed immediately. "You look like you haven't slept in days." "I'm fine," Sarah insisted, tying her apron. At 9:30, she dropped a tray of food. Plates shattered and eggs splattered across the floor. "That's it," Rick said, helping her clean up. "In my office." "Now." In the small back office, Rick pointed to a chair. "Sit. Talk." Sarah's composure finally broke. Between sobs, she explained the rent increase and Douglas's ultimatum. Rick listened quietly. When she finished, he nodded. "I can give you some extra shifts and an advance on next week's pay. It won't be enough for the full increase, but it might buy you some time." "Thank you," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "My sister went through something similar last year. These property managers think they can bully people because most can't fight back. Take tomorrow morning off, get some rest." In apartment 305, Kevin Torres sat surrounded by open law books and his laptop. His roommate Jason peered over his shoulder. "You're really going after this Douglas guy?" Jason asked. Kevin nodded. What he did to Sarah violated at least 3 privacy laws. He publicly disclosed her financial information without consent. "Can she sue him?" "Maybe, but first we need to stop the eviction." Kevin highlighted a section in his textbook. "Here, tenants have rights, even when they're behind on rent. Douglas can't just throw her out with only 48 hours' notice." On the 5th floor, Mrs. Wilson had gathered 5 other elderly residents in her apartment. "I've lived here for 30 years, Mrs. Wilson told them. "I've seen managers come and go, but Douglas Parker is the worst. The way he humiliated that poor woman in front of her children was disgraceful." "What can we do?" Mr. Gable, a retired teacher, asked. "We write letters," Mrs. Wilson said, passing out stationery. "To the property owner, to the Better Business Bureau, to the Housing Authority. Douglas works for someone. They need to know how he's treating tenants." Meanwhile, in apartment 12, Mark and Lisa Johnson drafted a petition at their kitchen table. "The rent increase affects everyone," Mark said, "not just Sarah." Lisa nodded. 40% is outrageous. No one got a 40% raise this year. "If enough people sign, the owner might reconsider," Mark said, typing. "At least implement it gradually." When Sarah returned to Oakwood that afternoon, she found 7 people waiting in the lobby. Kevin, Mrs. Wilson, the Johnsons, and 3 other tenants stood together. "Sarah, we need to talk to you," Kevin said. Surprised, Sarah followed them to Mrs. Wilson's apartment. Kevin spread his notes on the coffee table. What Douglas did was illegal, he explained. He violated your privacy rights by sharing your financial information publicly, and he can't evict you with only 48 hours' notice. The law requires at least 30 days in Connecticut. We've started a petition against the rent increase, Lisa Johnson added. 23 people have already signed. Mrs. Wilson patted Sarah's hand, and we're writing complaint letters to the property owner. Sarah felt overwhelmed. I appreciate this, but Douglas doesn't seem like the type to back down. He has to follow the law, Kevin insisted. I'm helping another tenant in my law clinic class with a similar issue. We can file for an emergency stay of eviction tomorrow morning. And in the meantime, Mrs. Wilson added, we'll make sure you and your boys aren't alone. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it and froze. The text read, Sarah, it's Richard. I'm back in town and would like to see Ethan and Noah. Can we talk? She quickly put the phone away, her heart pounding. Is everything okay? Lisa asked. Yes, Sarah said quickly. Just work. Later that evening, Sarah tucked the twins into bed. Mom, are those people going to help us stay here? Noah asked. They're trying, Sarah said. Now get some sleep. In the living room, she stared at Richard's text. After 3 years of minimal contact, he wanted to see the boys. The timing couldn't be worse. She typed a brief response. This isn't a good time. His reply came immediately. I understand, but I'm back permanently. I'd really like to be part of their lives again. Sarah turned off her phone without responding. She had more urgent problems. The next morning, Tanya knocked on Sarah's door at 7 o'clock. The boys ready for school? She asked. Almost, Sarah said. Thanks for walking them today. My shift at the diner starts at 8. No problem. Oh, and Kevin wants you to meet him at the courthouse at 11. He's filing that emergency stay. After Tanya left with the twins, Sarah prepared for work. She was reaching for her purse when someone knocked. Expecting Tanya again, she opened the door. Instead, she found Douglas. Surprise inspection, he said with a smirk, pushing past her into the apartment. You can't just enter without proper notice, Sarah protested. Douglas ignored her, walking through the apartment and making notes. Damaged paint in bathroom, carpet worn in hallway. These are tenant responsibilities according to your lease. Those were like that when we moved in. Douglas continued writing. I'll be adding these violations to your account. That'll be an additional $200 on top of your rent. After he left, Sarah sank onto the couch, fighting tears of frustration. Outside Oakwood Apartments, Richard Mitchell waited in his rental car. He'd spent 3 years building his company, working 18-hour days and sacrificing everything for success. Now that he had achieved it, he realized what he'd really lost: time with his sons. He noticed Tanya walking toward the building and recognized her from years ago. He got out of his car. Tanya? It's Richard Mitchell. Tanya turned, her expression immediately cooling. Well, look who decided to remember he has kids. I deserve that, Richard admitted. How are they? Ethan and Noah. They're 10-year-old boys who barely remember their father, Tanya said sharply. I'm back for good, Richard said. I want to be part of their lives again. Good timing, Tanya said sarcastically. Their mother is about to be evicted because some power-hungry building manager raised the rent 40% without warning. Richard's expression changed. What? Sarah never mentioned. Of course she didn't. Her pride wouldn't let her. Tanya softened slightly. Look, if you really want to help, talk to Kevin Torres in apartment 305. He's helping Sarah fight this legally. As Tanya walked away, Richard sat back in his car, processing this information. He'd returned hoping to reconnect with his sons, but now realized Sarah was in serious trouble. He reached for his phone and looked up Tenant Rights Connecticut in the search bar. He had resources and connections now. Maybe he could help without Sarah knowing, at least until he understood the full situation. Richard started his car with new determination. He needed to find this Kevin Torres and learn everything about what was happening at Oakwood Apartments. Richard knocked on the door of apartment 305 20 minutes later. A young man with dark-rimmed glasses opened it. "Kevin Torres?" Richard asked. "Yes?" Kevin looked confused. "My name is Richard Mitchell. I'm Sarah Mitchell's ex-husband and the father of her sons." Kevin's eyebrows raised. "The ex-husband who's been in California for 3 years?" "That would be me," Richard admitted. "Tanya told me you're helping Sarah with her housing situation. I'd like to understand what's happening." Kevin hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in, but I should warn you, Sarah hasn't told me she wants you involved." Inside the apartment, textbooks and legal papers covered a small table. Richard sat on the edge of a worn couch while Kevin explained the situation with Douglas Parker and the rent increase. "So this building manager publicly humiliated Sarah in front of everyone, including my sons?" Richard asked, his jaw tightening. Kevin nodded. "And that's just part of it. He's breaking several laws. I'm filing for an emergency stay of eviction this morning." Richard pulled out his phone. "I know some excellent attorneys in New York. I could have them here by tonight." "Whoa!" Kevin held up his hands. "Sarah is very proud. She barely accepted our help. I don't think she'd appreciate you swooping in with expensive lawyers." Richard sighed. "You're right. But there must be something I can do." "There might be," Kevin said slowly. "But first, can I ask why you're suddenly interested in helping after 3 years away?" Richard was silent for a moment. "I've spent the last year in therapy, dealing with my workaholism. My company was recently acquired for a significant amount. I realized I've missed watching my sons grow up, and money means nothing without family." "That's surprisingly self-aware," Kevin said. "It took a lot of therapy sessions," Richard replied with a sad smile. "I'm not asking for Sarah to forgive me overnight. I just want a chance to be a father again." Kevin tapped his pen against his notepad. "If you really want to help, there might be a way that doesn't directly involve Sarah yet. I need information about who actually owns this building." At the courthouse downtown, Sarah met Kevin at 11 o'clock. "I filed the emergency stay," Kevin told her. "The judge will review it today, but it could be tomorrow before we hear anything." "Thank you," Sarah said. "I don't know how to repay you for this. Just come to the Tenants Association meeting tonight. Mrs. Wilson is organizing it in the common room at 7 o'clock. Sarah looked uncertain. "I don't know, Kevin. Douglas is already targeting me." "That's exactly why you should come. There's strength in numbers. Almost half the building has signed the Johnsons' petition." As they walked down the courthouse steps, Sarah's phone rang. It was Rosie's diner. "Sarah, it's Rick. I need you to come in early today. Margaret called in sick." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she promised. Back at her apartment, Sarah rushed to get ready for her shift. As she was leaving, she saw Douglas in the hallway posting notices on doors. "What's this?" she asked, looking at the paper he'd just taped to her door. "Notice of inspection violations," Douglas said with a smirk. "You have 7 days to fix them or face additional penalties." Sarah pulled down the notice. "These so-called violations were pre-existing conditions. You can't charge me for them." "Watch me," Douglas replied. "By the way, I noticed you've had quite a few visitors lately. Your lease limits guest frequency, you know." "They're neighbors, not guests," Sarah said, walking past him. "Better be careful who you associate with," Douglas called after her. "Some of them are causing trouble." At 7 o'clock that evening, Mrs. Wilson's old hand shook slightly as she arranged folding chairs in the common room. Mark Johnson helped her set up a small table at the front. "Nervous?" he asked her. "A little," Mrs. Wilson admitted. "I haven't organized anything since my husband died 5 years ago." People began filing in. The Johnsons, Kevin, Tanya, and about 15 other residents took seats. Sarah arrived last, slipping in quietly and sitting near the back. Mrs. Wilson stepped to the front. Thank you all for coming. I've lived at Oakwood for 30 years, through 6 different building managers, but I've never seen one behave like Douglas Parker. Heads nodded around the room. We're here to discuss 2 issues, she continued. First, the unreasonable rent increase. Second, how Douglas treats tenants. Kevin has information about our legal rights. Kevin stood up and began explaining tenant protections under Connecticut law when the door burst open. Douglas walked in, his face red with anger. What's going on here? He demanded. A tenants association meeting, Mrs. Wilson said calmly. You don't have permission to use this room for unauthorized gatherings, Douglas said. Everyone needs to leave immediately. The building guidelines clearly state that common areas are available to residents with 24-hour notice, Kevin responded. Mrs. Wilson posted the notice yesterday. I make the rules here, Douglas said, and I'm telling you this meeting is over. No one moved. Douglas pointed at Mrs. Wilson. You should be careful, old lady. At your age, finding a new apartment would be difficult, especially with an eviction on your record. At that, Sarah stood up. Stop threatening people, Douglas. We have every right to meet and discuss building issues. Well, if it isn't poverty poster girl, Douglas sneered. Rallying the troops won't change your situation. You still owe rent plus violation fees. This isn't just about me, Sarah said, her voice stronger than she expected. It's about how you treat everyone here. We're people, not ATMs. Douglas's face darkened. You'll regret this, all of you. He stormed out, slamming the door. A moment of silence followed. Then Mrs. Wilson spoke. Thank you, Sarah. The meeting continued, with residents sharing their experiences with Douglas. Plans were made to file official complaints with the housing authority and to contact the property owner directly. When the meeting ended, Sarah felt a strange mix of fear and pride. Standing up to Douglas had been terrifying, but also empowering. Outside Oakwood Apartments, Richard waited in his car. He'd spent the day with a private investigator digging into Douglas Parker's background. What they found was troubling. Douglas had been fired from 2 previous property management jobs for financial improprieties. Richard saw Tanya exit the building and waved her over. How was the meeting? He asked. Interesting, Tanya said. Douglas tried to shut it down, but Sarah stood up to him. Sarah did? Richard couldn't hide his surprise. She's stronger than you remember, Tanya said. Speaking of Sarah, have you told her you're investigating Douglas? Richard shook his head. Not yet. She's dealing with enough, and she'd probably refuse my help anyway. You're right about that, Tanya agreed. She's stubborn. But those boys need stability. How are they? Richard asked quietly. Struggling. Noah's having nightmares and Ethan's grades are slipping. They're scared, Richard. Richard's face hardened with resolve. I found something today. Douglas Parker has been fired from other buildings for skimming maintenance fees, and the company that owns Oakwood, Providence Real Estate Group, is basically a shell corporation. What does that mean? It means someone's hiding behind layers of paperwork. I've asked my lawyer to look into purchasing options. Tanya's eyes widened. You're going to buy the building? If that's what it takes, Richard said. In the meantime, keep this between us. I need to approach Sarah carefully. As Tanya walked back to the building, she turned. Richard, don't hurt them again. They've been through enough. In her apartment, Sarah tucked the twins into bed. Mom, why was Mr. Parker so angry at the meeting? Noah asked. Sarah froze. You know about the meeting? Jason from apartment 310 told us, Ethan explained. He said you stood up to Mr. Parker. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. Sometimes adults disagree about rules and how people should be treated. Mr. Parker and I have different opinions. Are we still going to have to move? Noah asked. I'm doing everything I can to make sure we stay, Sarah promised. After the boys fell asleep, Sarah checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Richard and a text. Sarah, please call me. It's important." She ignored it and opened her laptop instead. She had a midnight shift for her customer service job, but she could barely focus. The confrontation with Douglas kept replaying in her mind. Her phone buzzed again with a text from Kevin. "Judge will review our case tomorrow morning. Stay strong." Outside her window, she could see the lights of downtown West Haven. Somewhere out there, Richard was back in town, wanting to see the twins. After 3 years of near silence, he'd chosen this moment to return, when everything was falling apart. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back tears. She couldn't think about Richard now. One crisis at a time. In his downtown hotel room, Richard stared at property records on his laptop. The more he discovered about Douglas Parker and the ownership of Oakwood Apartments, the more determined he became to protect his family, even if they didn't know they needed his protection yet. Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds as Sarah finally closed her laptop. She had finished her overnight customer service shift, but hadn't slept at all. Her eyes burned with exhaustion. Just as she was about to lie down for a quick nap before the twins woke up, a loud knock rattled her door. "Mandatory inspection!" Douglas's voice called out. Sarah opened the door to find Douglas holding a clipboard, a fake smile on his face. "It's 6:30 in the morning," Sarah protested. "Inspection times are at management discretion," Douglas said, pushing past her. "I'm checking all the apartments of people who attended that illegal meeting yesterday." "The meeting wasn't illegal." Douglas ignored her, walking through the apartment making notes. "Tsk, tsk. Marks on the wall here, scratches on the floor there." "Those have been there since we moved in," Sarah said. "Really? I don't see them documented in your move-in inspection form." Douglas smirked. "That's another $100 in damages." After he left, Sarah sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. The twins would be up soon, and she had a morning shift at Rosie's Diner starting at 9 o'clock. At 8:15, Sarah woke the twins for school. "Mom, you look really tired," Ethan said, studying her face. "I'm fine, honey. Just worked late." Sarah forced a smile. "Now hurry up or you'll be late." "I don't feel good," Noah said suddenly. "My stomach hurts." Sarah felt his forehead. "You don't have a fever." "I just want to stay home," Noah insisted, his eyes filling with tears. "Is this because of what happened with Mr. Parker?" Sarah asked gently. Noah looked down. "What if he makes us leave while I'm at school?" "That's not going to happen," Sarah promised. "Kevin is helping us with legal protection." After much convincing, both boys reluctantly went to school. Sarah hurried to get ready for work, already knowing she'd be late. At Rosie's Diner, Rick frowned as Sarah rushed in at 9:20. "This is the third time this week," he said. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, tying her apron quickly. "Douglas showed up for a surprise inspection this morning." "Look, Sarah," Rick sighed. "I know you're going through a tough time, but I have a business to run. I'm putting you on probation. One more late arrival means termination." Sarah nodded, trying to hide how much his words hurt. She needed this job desperately. Throughout her shift, Sarah struggled to focus. She mixed up orders and dropped a coffee pot, shattering it. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and a pounding headache made it hard to think clearly. At 2 o'clock, her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan's teacher. "Please call regarding Ethan's behavior today." In his hotel room, Richard met with a private investigator named Mike Powell. "What did you find?" Richard asked. Mike passed him a folder. "Douglas Parker has worked at 5 different properties in the past 8 years. He was fired from 3 for financial irregularities." "And Providence Real Estate Group?" "It's a shell corporation registered in Delaware. The trail leads to another company, then another. Whoever owns Oakwood doesn't want to be easily identified." Richard nodded. "Keep digging." "I want to know who I'm dealing with." After Mike left, Richard called his attorney in New York. "Jonathan, I need to know what it would take to purchase an apartment building here in West Haven, and I need it done quickly and quietly." Are we talking about that building your ex-wife lives in? Jonathan asked. Yes. I have reason to believe the manager is embezzling funds and harassing tenants. Richard, I have to ask, is this about helping your ex-wife or trying to win her back? Richard paused. It's about making things right. For my sons. Back at Oakwood that afternoon, Sarah called Ethan's teacher from the hallway. Mrs. Baker, what happened with Ethan today? He got into a fight during recess, Mrs. Baker explained. When I asked why, he said a boy was making fun of his family for being poor. Sarah closed her eyes. I'm so sorry. There's more. Both Ethan and Noah fell asleep during class today, and their homework has been incomplete all week. Is everything okay at home, Miss Mitchell? We're going through some housing issues, Sarah admitted, but I'll make sure they get back on track. As Sarah ended the call, she heard shouting from Tanya's apartment. She rushed to find water pouring from Tanya's bathroom ceiling. The pipe burst an hour ago, Tanya explained frantically. I called Douglas 5 times. Did he send maintenance? He said it's not an emergency and they'll get to it next week. Sarah helped Tanya place buckets under the worst leaks. Within minutes, Kevin, the Johnsons, and 3 other neighbors arrived to help. I called a friend who's a plumber, Kevin said. He'll come after his shift ends at 6. I can't afford a plumber, Tanya worried. We're splitting the cost, Mark Johnson said. Everyone is chipping in. Sarah felt overwhelmed by her neighbor's kindness. As they worked together to contain the water damage, her phone rang. It was her customer service supervisor. Sarah, your call resolution metrics have fallen below acceptable levels the past 2 weeks, her supervisor said without greeting. This is a warning. If your performance doesn't improve by next evaluation, we'll have to let you go. That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table surrounded by bills and notices. A text message from Richard appeared. Sarah, please, we need to talk. It's important. After staring at it for several minutes, she finally replied, Fine. Tomorrow. Coffee shop on Main Street. 10 a.m. His response came immediately. I'll be there. Thank you. Sarah barely slept that night. Noah woke up crying from another nightmare, and she spent an hour comforting him. By morning, dark circles underlined her bloodshot eyes. The coffee shop on Main Street was quiet at 10 o'clock the next morning. Sarah spotted Richard immediately. He looked different, older, with streaks of gray in his hair that hadn't been there 3 years ago. Sarah, he stood as she approached. Thank you for meeting me. She sat across from him. Make it quick. I have a shift at 11:30. You look exhausted, Richard said gently. That's not why we're here, Sarah replied coldly. What do you want, Richard? Richard took a deep breath. I want to see the boys. I know I've been absent and that's on me, but I'm back now, permanently, and I want to be part of their lives again. Why now? After 3 years of birthday cards and occasional phone calls, I sold my company. I've been in therapy dealing with my workaholism. I realize what I lost by putting success before family. Sarah laughed without humor. How convenient that you had this realization after becoming rich. Richard leaned forward. I deserve that. But this isn't about money. It's about being a father again. The timing is terrible, Sarah said. We're in the middle of a housing crisis. I know about Douglas Parker and the rent increase, Richard admitted. Sarah's eyes narrowed. How? Tanya told me. Sarah, I can help. No, Sarah cut him off. I don't need your money. It's not charity, Richard insisted. It's my responsibility as their father to ensure they have stable housing. You gave up that responsibility when you moved across the country to chase your startup dreams. Richard nodded. You're right. I failed you and the boys, but I'm asking for a chance to make it right. I need to go, Sarah said, standing up. I'll think about letting you see the twins. That's all I can offer right now. The next morning, Sarah arrived at Rosie's diner 15 minutes early, determined to save her job. She had just put on her apron when Douglas appeared at the counter. What are you doing here? She asked. Having breakfast. Douglas smiled coldly. I'm allowed to eat wherever I want. Throughout her shift, Douglas watched her, making her increasingly nervous. When she approached his table to refill his coffee, he deliberately moved his arm, causing her to spill coffee on his shirt. "Look what you did!" he shouted, jumping up. "I'm so sorry!" Sarah grabbed napkins. "You did that on purpose!" Douglas yelled, loud enough for everyone to hear. Rick emerged from the kitchen. "What's going on?" "Your waitress assaulted me," Douglas claimed. "She's clearly incompetent." "It was an accident," Sarah protested. Rick pulled Sarah aside. "Sarah, I warned you about any more problems." "Rick, he did it on purpose. He's the manager who's trying to evict me." Rick looked between them, conflicted. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I have to let you go. I can't have scenes like this in my diner." Sarah's world seemed to tilt sideways. She had just lost half her income. Outside the diner, Douglas waited with a smug expression. "Oops. Looks like you're having a bad day. How will you pay that rent increase now?" As he walked away, Sarah's phone rang. It was Kevin. "Sarah, the judge denied our emergency stay. Douglas can proceed with eviction proceedings." Sarah leaned against the wall, feeling her legs might give out. She had no choice now. With trembling fingers, she dialed Richard's number. "Richard, we need to talk. I've lost my job at the diner." "Meet me at Wilson's Cafe in 20 minutes, Richard replied immediately. Sarah could hear the concern in his voice. "Okay," she said quietly, her pride finally crumbling under the weight of desperation. Wilson's Cafe was only 3 blocks from the diner. Sarah arrived first and found a quiet corner table. When Richard walked in, she barely looked up. "Sarah," he said, sitting across from her, "tell me what happened." Sarah explained how Douglas had orchestrated her firing and how the judge had denied their emergency stay of eviction. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "The customer service job doesn't pay enough for rent, food, and utilities, and now Douglas can legally evict us." Richard leaned forward. "Let me help, Sarah. Not for you, for the boys." "What kind of help?" she asked cautiously. "Financial help. I can cover the rent increase and more." Sarah shook her head. "I can't take your money like that." "Then consider it a loan," Richard suggested, "with proper paperwork and terms." After a long pause, Sarah nodded. "A loan. With papers, and I will pay you back." "My lawyer can meet us tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to draw up the documents," Richard said. "I have an office space downtown." The next morning, Sarah and Richard sat across from Jonathan Miller, Richard's attorney. The office was in a small business center Richard had rented temporarily. "The agreement is straightforward," Jonathan explained, sliding papers across the desk. "Mr. Mitchell will provide a loan of $15,000 to cover your housing costs for 6 months. Repayment begins 1 year from today with minimal interest." Sarah stared at the amount. $15,000 is too much. "It gives you breathing room," Richard said. "Time to find another job, deal with Douglas, and stabilize things for the twins." "This is strictly a loan," Sarah insisted, pen hovering over the document. "Not charity." "Of course," Richard agreed. As Sarah signed the papers, she couldn't help feeling she had failed somehow. For 3 years, she had managed on her own. Now she was dependent on Richard again. Back at Oakwood that afternoon, Sarah found a note taped to her door. "Water shut off tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. building maintenance." Tanya appeared in the hallway, a similar notice in her hand. "Did you get one too?" "Yes. Building maintenance?" "That's strange," Tanya frowned. "Only certain apartments got notices. Mostly people from the tenants meeting." The next morning, Sarah woke early to fill the bathtub and some containers with water. At exactly 6 o'clock, the water stopped flowing. By mid-morning, Sarah heard a commotion in the hallway. She opened her door to find Kevin and Mark Johnson helping Mrs. Wilson, who looked pale and shaky. "What happened?" Sarah asked. "Douglas turned off the hot water. Not all water," Kevin explained angrily. Mrs. Wilson didn't know and took a freezing cold shower. She nearly collapsed. "I'm fine, dears," Mrs. Wilson protested weakly. "Just a bit dizzy." "We're taking you to the hospital," Mark insisted. "My wife is bringing the car around." As they helped Mrs. Wilson to the elevator, other residents emerged from their apartments. The news spread quickly. Douglas had turned off hot water only to apartments of residents who attended the tenants' meeting. "This is targeted harassment," Kevin told the gathered neighbors. "We need to document everything." In downtown West Haven, Richard sat in a meeting room at the Coastal Inn. Across from him was James Porter, a representative from Providence Real Estate Group. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Porter," Richard said. "I'm interested in purchasing Oakwood Apartments." Porter looked surprised. "Oakwood isn't officially on the market, Mr. Mitchell." "I understand, but I'm prepared to make a very competitive offer." Richard slid a folder across the table. "Before we discuss price, however, there's something you should know about your building manager." Porter opened the folder and frowned at the documents inside. "These records show that Douglas Parker has been embezzling maintenance fees for at least 2 years, Richard explained. "He's also implemented unauthorized rent increases and is pocketing the difference." "These are serious allegations," Porter said, studying the papers. "With solid evidence," Richard added. "There's more. He's harassing tenants, violating privacy laws, and ignoring safety issues. Just this morning, he shut off hot water to several apartments as retaliation against residents who formed a tenants' association." The Porter looked troubled. "I'll need to investigate these claims." "Of course," Richard nodded. "But while you investigate, I'd like to make a formal offer." He wrote a number on a notepad and passed it to Porter. Porter's eyebrows rose. "This is very generous." "I believe Oakwood has potential with proper management," Richard said simply. "How quickly could we close a deal?" At the hospital, Sarah sat beside Mrs. Wilson's bed. The elderly woman had been diagnosed with mild hypothermia and dehydration. "You don't have to stay, dear," Mrs. Wilson told her. "I'm sure you need to get back to the boys." "Tanya's watching them," Sarah replied. "I wanted to make sure you're okay." Mrs. Wilson patted Sarah's hand. "In 30 years at Oakwood, I've never seen a manager like Douglas. Pure meanness in that man." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Loan deposited in your account. Let me know when I can see the boys." She put the phone away, feeling conflicted. The money would help tremendously. But allowing Richard back into the twins' lives was another matter entirely. When Sarah returned to Oakwood that evening, she found an official eviction notice on her door. According to the document, she had 48 hours to vacate the premises. "This can't be right," she muttered. "Even with the denied emergency stay, we should have at least 7 days." She took the notice to Kevin's apartment. "This is illegal," Kevin confirmed after examining it. "The law requires proper notice periods. He's trying to intimidate you." Sarah returned to her apartment and tore down the notice. As she was opening her door, Douglas appeared in the hallway. "I see you got my message," he said with a smirk. "This notice is illegal," Sarah replied. "I know my rights." Douglas stepped closer. "Rights? Let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to leave, and I'm going to make sure you never rent in this town again. I have friends in every property management company in West Haven." "You can't blacklist me," Sarah said, standing her ground. "Watch me," Douglas sneered. "No one crosses me and gets away with it." What neither of them noticed was Kevin standing around the corner, his phone recording the entire exchange. That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table explaining the situation to the twins. "So Dad is giving us money to help with rent?" Ethan asked suspiciously. "It's a loan," Sarah corrected. "I'll pay him back." "Does this mean we'll get to see him?" Noah asked, his eyes hopeful. Sarah hesitated. "Would you like that?" "Yes," Noah said immediately. Ethan crossed his arms. "He left us for 3 years. He made mistakes," Sarah said carefully, "but he wants to be part of your lives again." Why should we trust him? Ethan demanded. Sarah had no good answer. The same question had been circling in her own mind. Her phone chimed with an email notification. It was from the West Haven Housing Court. She opened it and gasped. "Mom, what is it?" Noah asked. It's a court order," Sarah explained, reading quickly. "It says our eviction has been temporarily stayed by judicial order." "What does that mean?" Ethan asked. "It means Mr. Parker can't make us leave right now," Sarah explained, still shocked. "Someone filed an emergency injunction." She immediately suspected Richard but was interrupted by a building-wide text message from Douglas. "Mandatory all-tenant meeting tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. lobby. Attendance required. Important announcement regarding ownership changes." "Ownership changes?" Sarah read aloud. "What does that mean?" In his hotel room, Richard ended a call with his lawyer, a smile spreading across his face. "It's done," he said to himself. "The preliminary agreement is signed." He looked at the photo of Ethan and Noah on his phone screen. Soon they would be safe from Douglas Parker's threats, and perhaps in time, Sarah might forgive him enough to let him be a real father again. Richard didn't know that Douglas had already planned one final act of revenge, one that would force Richard and Sarah to confront their past and present in front of everyone at Oakwood Apartments. At 9:45 the next morning, residents began gathering in the lobby of Oakwood Apartments. Sarah arrived with the twins, who had insisted on coming despite her concerns. "Why do we have to be here?" Ethan grumbled. "Douglas made it sound important," Sarah replied. "Something about the building being sold." Noah looked around nervously. "Will we have to move?" "I don't know, honey," Sarah said honestly. The lobby filled quickly. Mrs. Wilson had returned from the hospital and sat in a chair near the front, looking frail but determined. Kevin stood near the back wall with his roommate. The Johnsons and Tanya saved seats for Sarah and the twins. At exactly 10 o'clock, Douglas strode in wearing a suit that seemed too expensive for a building manager. His face wore an unusual smile that made Sarah uneasy. "Good morning, residents of Oakwood Apartments," Douglas announced loudly. "Thank you all for coming to this mandatory meeting." No one responded. "I have exciting news," Douglas continued. "Oakwood Apartments has been purchased by Providence Real Estate Group. The sale was finalized yesterday." Worried whispers spread through the crowd. Corporate ownership often meant higher rents and stricter rules. "The new owner wants to meet everyone and discuss the future of this property," Douglas said, his smile widening. "He's very eager to introduce himself." Douglas gestured toward the front door with theatrical flair. "Please welcome our new owner." The door opened, and Richard Mitchell walked in. Sarah gasped. The twins stared in shock. "Dad?" Noah whispered. Douglas's smug expression froze as Richard walked toward the center of the lobby. Richard nodded politely at several residents before stopping directly in front of Sarah and the twins. "Hello, Sarah," he said quietly. The lobby fell silent. Everyone seemed to realize this was more than a business transaction. Richard turned to address the crowd. "For those who don't know me, I'm Richard Mitchell. As of yesterday afternoon, I am the new owner of Oakwood Apartments." Douglas stood nearby, his smile now strained. "My first official act as owner," Richard continued, "is to cancel all rent increases that were scheduled to take effect this month." Applause broke out among the residents. Douglas's face reddened. "My second act," Richard said when the applause died down, "is to announce that Mr. Parker is no longer employed here, effective immediately." Douglas stepped forward. "Now wait just a minute. 2 security officers from Mitchell Properties are waiting outside," Richard interrupted calmly. "They will escort you to collect your personal belongings from the management office." "You can't do this!" Douglas shouted. "I can and I have," Richard replied. He turned back to the residents. "For the past month, I've been investigating Mr. Parker's management practices. He has been pocketing half of all maintenance fees and intentionally delaying repairs." Shocked murmurs spread through the lobby. "More disturbing," Richard continued, "the 40% rent increase was never approved by the previous owners. Mr. Parker implemented it himself to collect larger commission." "That's a lie!" Douglas yelled, his face now deep red. Two men in uniforms entered the lobby. "Mr. Parker," one of them said, "we need you to come with us." "This isn't over," Douglas snarled as they led him away. He pointed at Sarah. "You'll regret this. Both of you will." After Douglas was escorted out, Richard addressed the residents again. "I apologize for the disruption. There will be a proper building management team in place by tomorrow. In the meantime, if you have any maintenance emergencies, please contact the number being distributed now." As Richard's assistant handed out business cards, the residents began talking excitedly among themselves. Many approached Richard to introduce themselves. Sarah remained frozen in her seat, the twins beside her. Noah looked excited, but Ethan's expression was suspicious. "Mom!" Noah tugged her sleeve. "Did you know Dad bought our building?" "No," Sarah said quietly. "I had no idea." Richard finished speaking with Mrs. Wilson and made his way over to Sarah. "Could we talk privately?" he asked. After asking Tanya to watch the twins, Sarah followed Richard to the small courtyard behind the building. They sat on a bench far from the door. "You bought Oakwood," Sarah finally said. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" Richard sighed. "Because you would have refused my help. You made that clear at the coffee shop." "So instead, you secretly bought the entire building?" Sarah's voice rose. "Do you have any idea how this makes me look? Everyone will think I only got to stay because of you." "I didn't do this to embarrass you," Richard insisted. "I did it because Douglas was breaking the law and hurting people, including you and our sons. You could have given me warning." "I'm sorry about that," Richard admitted. "Everything happened faster than I expected. The deal was only finalized yesterday afternoon." Sarah shook her head. "I don't even know what to say." "Sarah, buying this building wasn't just about helping you," Richard said softly. "It was about making amends and creating stability where I could rebuild relationships with Ethan and Noah. They barely know you anymore." "I know. That's my fault," Richard acknowledged. "I'm not asking for forgiveness overnight. Just a chance to be their father again." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I need time to process all this." "Of course," Richard nodded. "Just know that nothing changes for you financially. Your apartment is yours. No strings attached." When Sarah returned to the lobby, residents were still buzzing with excitement. Several approached to congratulate her, assuming she had known about Richard's purchase. "You must be so relieved," Lisa Johnson said. "We're all grateful to your ex-husband," Mrs. Wilson added. "He saved our community." Sarah forced a smile, unsure how to respond. She found the twins with Tanya. "Where's Dad?" Noah asked immediately. "He had some business to take care of," Sarah explained. "Did you know he was buying our building?" Ethan demanded. "No, I didn't," Sarah said honestly. "He just did it to show off," Ethan muttered, "because he's rich now." "That's not fair," Noah argued. "He helped everyone, not just us." "Boys, please," Sarah said tiredly. "Let's go upstairs. We need to talk about this." In their apartment, Sarah sat the twins on the couch. "Your father and I need to discuss how we move forward. This doesn't mean we're getting back together." "But we'll get to see him, right?" Noah asked hopefully. "Yes," Sarah nodded. "If that's what you want." "I don't care," Ethan said, crossing his arms. "He left for 3 years. Why should we trust him now?" "People make mistakes," Sarah said carefully. "Your father made a big one by putting work before family. But he seems to understand that now." "So he gets to be rich and then just come back like nothing happened?" Ethan's voice cracked. Sarah pulled him into a hug. "It's okay to be angry with him, Ethan. Your feelings are valid, but maybe give him a chance to prove he's changed." That evening, Richard met with a small team in the building's management office. They reviewed maintenance requests that Douglas had ignored for months. "Prioritize safety issues first," Richard instructed. "Broken locks, electrical problems, that burst pipe on the 4th floor." "What about staffing?" his assistant asked. "I'm promoting Tanya Rivera to building manager if she'll accept," Richard replied. She knows the residents and cares about the community. A security officer entered. Mr. Mitchell, Douglas Parker is attempting to enter the building. He says he left personal items in the office. Escort him up with supervision, Richard decided, but don't let him interact with any residents. 10 minutes later, the officer returned, looking concerned. Sir, Mr. Parker became belligerent when we wouldn't let him enter alone. He started shouting threats about you and Ms. Mitchell in the parking lot. We had to escort him off the property. Richard frowned. Increase security patrols for the next few days. And make sure there's someone at the front desk 24 hours. After the meeting, Richard stood by the office window looking out at the building he now owned. This wasn't how he'd planned to re-enter Sarah and the twins' lives. But when he discovered what Douglas was doing, he couldn't stand by and watch. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. The boys have questions. Can you come to dinner tomorrow? 6 p.m. Richard stared at the message, his heart racing. I'll be there, he typed back. Thank you. Outside Oakwood Apartments, Douglas Parker sat in his car watching the building with growing rage. His career was ruined, his reputation destroyed, all because of Sarah Mitchell and her rich ex-husband. They think this is over, he muttered to himself. It's not over until I say it's over. Douglas watched the lights go off in the Oakwood Apartments management office. His fingers tightened around his steering wheel. Tomorrow he would call his cousin who worked at a law firm. Someone would pay for this humiliation. Inside apartment 27, Sarah cleaned the kitchen nervously. Richard would be arriving for dinner in 20 minutes. It would be the first time he had been in their home since before the divorce. Mom, what are you making? Noah asked, bouncing on his toes with excitement. Just spaghetti, Sarah replied. Nothing fancy. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed. I still don't understand why he had to buy our whole building. Normal dads just pay child support. Your father has never been normal, Sarah said, then immediately regretted her words. I mean, he tends to think big. At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Noah raced to answer it while Ethan remained seated. Dad? Noah's voice was full of excitement. Richard stood in the doorway holding a small gift bag and a bouquet of flowers. He looked almost as nervous as Sarah felt. Hi, Noah, Richard said, his voice gentle. You've grown so much. He entered the apartment, handing the flowers to Sarah. Thank you for inviting me. They're nice, Sarah said awkwardly, taking the flowers. Thank you. Richard approached the kitchen table. Hello, Ethan. Ethan mumbled a greeting without making eye contact. I brought something for you both, Richard said, placing the gift bag on the table. Noah opened it eagerly, pulling out 2 electronic tablets in protective cases. The newest models, Richard explained. I thought they might help with schoolwork. Cool, Noah exclaimed. Sarah's expression tightened. That's very generous, Richard. Her tone made Richard look up. He recognized the tension in her voice. Dinner was uncomfortable. Noah chatted enthusiastically about school and friends, while Ethan pushed food around his plate, answering questions with single words. Richard tried to engage both boys equally, but the gap between them was clear. After the twins went to bed, Sarah and Richard sat in the living room. The tablets are too expensive, Sarah said quietly. Richard looked surprised. I wanted to give them something nice. That's the problem. They're not used to something nice from you. Noah was thrilled, but Ethan sees it as you trying to buy their affection. Richard sighed. I didn't think of it that way. This is why we need to coordinate, Sarah explained. Expensive gifts make them feel the difference between their everyday life with me and what you can suddenly provide. I'm sorry, Richard said. I wasn't trying to make you look bad. I know, but we need boundaries and communication if this is going to work. You're right, Richard admitted. What do you suggest? There's a family counselor at the community center. She specializes in co-parenting after divorce. Maybe we could try a session. Richard nodded. I'd like that. The next morning, Tanya stared in disbelief at Richard across the desk in the management office. You want me to be the building manager? she asked. Yes, Richard confirmed. You know the residents. You care about this community, and you've shown leadership during the crisis with Douglas. But I don't have experience in property management. You have people's skills and integrity, Richard replied. The technical aspects can be learned. We'll provide training and support staff. Tanya considered the offer. What about my current job? This position pays more and includes an apartment with reduced rent. A smile slowly spread across Tanya's face. When do I start? 1 week later, Oakwood Apartments buzzed with activity. Construction crews moved through the building, fixing long-ignored problems. The leaky roof above the 5th floor was being replaced. New security doors were installed at all entrances. Sarah watched from her window as workers repaired the playground equipment in the courtyard. The twins were at school, and for the first time in months, she felt a sense of calm. Her phone rang. It was West Haven Hospital. Miss Mitchell? This is Barbara from Human Resources. We'd like you to come in for a second interview for the administration coordinator position. Sarah's heart leaped. Yes, of course. When would you like me to come in? After setting up the interview for the following day, Sarah called Tanya with the news. That's wonderful, Tanya exclaimed. The hospital has great benefits. It's not certain yet, Sarah cautioned, but it would be regular hours and the pay is better than both my previous jobs combined. Speaking of jobs, Tanya said, you should see what Douglas is up to. He filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Richard yesterday, and he's making complaints to the Housing Authority about supposed code violations at Oakwood. Can he cause real problems? Sarah worried. Richard's legal team doesn't seem concerned, Tanya assured her. They have solid evidence of Douglas's misconduct. In a small office at the West Haven Community Center, Sarah and Richard sat across from Dr. Elena Martinez, a family counselor. Thank you both for coming, Dr. Martinez said. Co-parenting after divorce is challenging, especially with your unique situation. We want what's best for the boys, Sarah said. Definitely, Richard agreed. Dr. Martinez nodded. Richard, could you explain why you left 3 years ago and what's changed now? Richard shifted uncomfortably. I was obsessed with success. I convinced myself that building my company was for my family, but the truth is, I put my ambition first. It took losing them to realize what really mattered. Sarah, how do you feel hearing that? Dr. Martinez asked. Sarah took a deep breath. Angry, still, hurt, but also relieved that he understands what happened. And your feelings about Richard's return? Complicated, Sarah admitted. I'm grateful for his help with the building situation, but I worry about the boys getting hurt if he leaves again. Richard leaned forward. I'm not leaving again. Ever. Words are easy, Sarah responded. The boys need consistency, not promises. Dr. Martinez nodded. That's a valid concern. Richard, how can you demonstrate consistency? By showing up, Richard said simply. Not just for fun times, but for homework and doctor appointments and everyday life. By the end of the session, they had established basic co-parenting guidelines and communication expectations. The following Saturday, Richard arrived at Sarah's apartment carrying a baseball, 2 gloves, and a bat. I thought we could go to the park, he suggested. Noah was immediately excited, but Ethan hung back. I don't really like baseball, Ethan mumbled. We could do something else, Richard offered. What do you enjoy? Ethan shrugged, not meeting his father's eyes. At the park, Noah ran ahead while Richard walked slowly with Ethan. Your mom tells me you're great at math, Richard said. Ethan nodded slightly. I was terrible at math when I was your age, Richard admitted. My dad had to hire a tutor. Ethan looked up, surprised. Really? But you're smart. You made a whole company. Being good at business doesn't mean I was good at everything, Richard said. We all have different strengths. For the first time, Ethan seemed interested in what his father had to say. At the baseball field, Richard pitched gently to Noah, who hit the ball with enthusiasm. After several successful hits, Noah called to his brother. "Ethan, try it." Reluctantly, Ethan took the bat. His first few swings missed completely. "That's okay," Richard encouraged. "It takes practice. Try holding the bat like this." He adjusted Ethan's grip slightly. The next pitch connected, sending the ball rolling across the grass. "I hit it!" Ethan exclaimed, his face lighting up. "Great job!" Richard cheered. For a brief moment, the three of them looked like any normal family enjoying a Saturday at the park. 2 weeks later, Sarah started her new job at West Haven Hospital. Her office was small but clean, with a window overlooking the parking lot. As the administration coordinator for the pediatrics department, she handled scheduling, insurance paperwork, and patient records. "How's the new job?" Richard asked when they met for coffee after her first week. "Good," Sarah replied. "Normal hours, nice people, and the boys seem happier now that I'm home every evening." "They're doing better in school too," Richard noted. "Their teacher mentioned it when I attended the parent-teacher conference." Sarah nodded. "Thanks for going. I appreciate you stepping in while I was training for the new position." Richard smiled. "That's what co-parenting is supposed to be, right? Sharing responsibilities?" "Noah has baseball tryouts next Thursday," Sarah said. "He really wants you to come." "I wouldn't miss it," Richard promised. The following Thursday, Sarah sat on the bleachers watching Noah's baseball tryouts. She was surprised when Richard arrived and sat several rows away, giving her space while still being present. Noah noticed both his parents and waved excitedly before stepping up to bat. When he hit the ball past the infield, Sarah and Richard both cheered, catching each other's eyes briefly before looking away. After tryouts, the coach posted the team roster. Noah's name was on the list. "I made it!" he shouted, running to Sarah. "Congratulations!" she said, hugging him. Noah then ran to Richard, who high-fived him with equal enthusiasm. On the way home, Noah talked non-stop about baseball, while Ethan told Richard about a science project he was working on. Sarah walked slightly ahead, listening to her sons' animated voices with their father. Something had shifted in their family dynamic. Not reconciliation, but a new kind of peace. That night, after the twins were asleep, Sarah noticed Richard had left his expensive watch on the bathroom counter. She picked it up, intending to set it aside for his next visit. The inscription on the back caught her eye. "Time is precious. Spend it with those who matter." Sarah placed the watch on the kitchen counter and stood for a moment, considering how much had changed in just 1 month. From the brink of homelessness to a stable job and home, from single parenting to cautious co-parenting. Outside in the parking lot, Douglas Parker sat in his car, watching the lights of the Mitchell apartment. His wrongful termination lawsuit had been dismissed that morning, but he had one more card to play, one that could destroy Richard's business reputation and Sarah's newfound stability. Douglas started his car with trembling hands. His face was flushed with anger as he drove away from Oakwood Apartments. Everything had been taken from him: his job, his authority, his dignity. But he wasn't finished yet. The next morning, Douglas sat in the West Haven Public Library using their computers to research Richard Mitchell's business activities. After 2 hours of searching, he found what he was looking for. "Bingo!" he whispered, printing an article from the West Haven Gazette. The headline read, "City Council to review proposals for affordable housing development." The article mentioned Mitchell Properties as one of 3 companies bidding for the contract to develop a vacant lot near downtown into affordable housing units. The project was worth millions of dollars and would establish the winning company as a major player in West Haven's development future. Douglas smiled coldly. He knew exactly how to hurt Richard now. At Oakwood Apartments, Sarah prepared for her second interview at West Haven Hospital. She had impressed them during her first meeting, and today she would meet with the department director. "Do I look okay?" she asked Tanya, who had stopped by to wish her luck. "You look perfect," Tanya assured her. Professional but approachable, exactly what they want for the front office. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Good luck today. The boys told me about your interview." She smiled slightly. The past month had brought unexpected changes in their family dynamics. Richard had kept his word about being consistently present for the twins. Instead of expensive gifts, he now brought board games or sports equipment for activities they could do together. Later that afternoon, Sarah sat across from Dr. Diana Chen, the pediatrics department director at West Haven Hospital. "Your experience in customer service is valuable," Dr. Chen said. "In pediatrics, we need someone who can handle stressed parents with compassion." "I understand completely," Sarah replied. "As a mother of twins, I know how worried parents feel when their children are sick." Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. "Well, Sarah, I'm pleased to offer you the position of administration coordinator. Can you start next Monday?" Sarah's heart soared. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity." As she left the hospital, Sarah immediately called Tanya with the good news. "That's amazing," Tanya exclaimed. "We should celebrate." "I need to tell the boys first," Sarah said. "And Richard should know too. He's been helping with the twins while I've been interviewing." That evening, Richard brought the twins home from Noah's baseball practice. Sarah greeted them at the door with a big smile. "I have news," she announced. "I got the job at the hospital." "Awesome, Mom," Noah cheered. "Does this mean we don't have to eat ramen noodles anymore?" Ethan asked with a grin. Sarah laughed. "We might still have ramen sometimes, but yes, things will be easier now." Richard stood in the doorway watching the family moment with a smile. "Congratulations, Sarah. That's wonderful news." "Thank you," Sarah said. "And thank you for helping with the boys during all this." "That's what I'm here for," Richard replied simply. As Richard turned to leave, Sarah surprised herself by saying, "Would you like to stay for dinner?" "Nothing fancy, just pizza to celebrate." Richard's expression brightened. "I'd like that very much." Across town, Douglas Parker sat in a sleek office facing Thomas Wilson, the CEO of Wilson Development Group, Richard's main competitor for the city contract. "I appreciate you meeting with me, Mr. Wilson," Douglas said. "I believe I have information that would interest you regarding Mitchell Properties." Wilson leaned back in his chair. "What kind of information?" Douglas opened a folder containing documents he had carefully prepared. Evidence that Mitchell Properties ignores building code violations and cuts corners on safety measures. Wilson raised an eyebrow. "These are serious allegations, with documentation to support them," Douglas assured him. "I was the manager at Oakwood Apartments before Richard Mitchell bought it. He's keeping these violations hidden from the city inspectors." Wilson examined the papers. "And you're bringing this to me because—" "I believe the city council should know what kind of developer they're considering for their project," Douglas said smoothly. "I thought you might help ensure they have all relevant information before making their decision." The following Tuesday evening, Richard prepared his presentation for the West Haven City Council meeting. His proposal for the affordable housing development included innovative design elements and community spaces. His phone rang. It was Jonathan, his attorney. "Richard, we have a problem," Jonathan said. "Someone has been circulating documents to council members claiming your properties have numerous code violations." "What? That's completely false," Richard said. "We've been fixing all the issues at Oakwood that Douglas—" He stopped suddenly. "Douglas, it has to be him." "The timing is suspicious," Jonathan agreed. "The vote is tomorrow night. Can we counter this?" "I'm already working on it. Kevin Torres has been documenting all the repairs and improvements at Oakwood. We'll bring the evidence to the meeting." After hanging up, Richard called Sarah to explain the situation. "Douglas is trying to sabotage your project?" Sarah asked, concerned. "It looks that way," Richard confirmed. "The council meeting is tomorrow night. Is there anything I can do to help?" Richard hesitated. "Actually, yes. The project includes affordable family housing. Having a resident of Oakwood speak about the positive changes might help counter Douglas's claims. "You want me to speak at the meeting?" "Only if you're comfortable with it," Richard said quickly. "I know public speaking isn't everyone's favorite activity." Sarah thought about it. "I'll do it. Not just for you, but because affordable housing is important for families like ours." The West Haven City Council chambers were packed the following evening. Sarah sat nervously in the audience while Richard prepared at the presenter's table. Kevin sat beside him with folders of documentation. Mayor Gloria Thompson called the meeting to order. "Tonight we'll hear final presentations for the Elm Street Development Project. Each company will have 15 minutes to present, followed by questions from the council." The first presenter was from Wilson Development Group. As Thomas Wilson concluded his presentation, he added something unexpected. "Before I finish, I feel it's my duty to raise concerns about one of the other bidders. Information has come to light suggesting Mitchell Properties has a history of ignoring building code violations. I've provided council members with documentation." Richard's jaw tightened as council members shuffled through papers that had been distributed before the meeting. When Richard's turn came, he began by addressing the allegations directly. "Before I present our vision for this project, I want to address the documents you've received. These are fabricated claims created by a disgruntled former employee who was terminated for embezzlement and tenant harassment." He signaled to Kevin, who distributed counter-documentation showing the improvements at Oakwood and financial records proving Douglas's misconduct. Richard was halfway through his presentation when the door opened and Douglas Parker walked in. He took a seat in the front row, directly in Richard's line of sight. When the public comment period began, Douglas was the first to approach the microphone. "My name is Douglas Parker. I was the manager at Oakwood Apartments until Richard Mitchell unfairly terminated me. The documents you received are accurate. Mitchell Properties covers up code violations and cuts corners on safety." Douglas then turned to face the audience. "Mitchell isn't who he pretends to be. He abandoned his family for years, then suddenly returned with his tech money to play hero. Ask his ex-wife, Sarah Mitchell, about his character. Oh wait, you can't, because he's buying her silence with a free apartment." Sarah gasped as all eyes turned to her. Without planning to, she stood up. "I would like to speak," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Mayor Thompson nodded. "Please come to the microphone." Sarah walked to the front, passing Douglas, who smirked at her. She took a deep breath. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. Yes, Richard is my ex-husband and the father of my children. And yes, he recently purchased Oakwood Apartments, where my sons and I live." She looked directly at the council members. "What Douglas Parker didn't tell you is that he tried to illegally evict us and other tenants by implementing an unauthorized 40% rent increase. He publicly humiliated residents, ignored dangerous maintenance issues, and pocketed repair fees." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "Since Richard purchased the building, all necessary repairs have been made. Residents have formed a council that gives us input on decisions. Oakwood has become a true community where people look out for each other." Douglas interrupted from his seat. "She's lying. She's just protecting him because—" "Mr. Parker, you will wait your turn," Mayor Thompson warned. Kevin Torres approached the microphone next, presenting evidence of Douglas's misconduct, including the recording of him threatening Sarah in the hallway. As Douglas grew more agitated, the doors at the back of the chambers opened. Mrs. Wilson entered, supported by Mark Johnson. Behind them came at least 20 other Oakwood residents. Mrs. Wilson made her way slowly to the microphone. "I've lived at Oakwood for 30 years. What Sarah Mitchell and Kevin Torres have told you is absolutely true. Douglas Parker was the worst manager in my memory, and Richard Mitchell has transformed our building into a safe, well-maintained home." One by one, other residents shared similar stories. Douglas's face grew increasingly red as his claims were systematically dismantled by resident testimonials. When the meeting concluded, the council voted unanimously to award the Elm Street project to Mitchell Properties, citing their community-focused approach and proven track record at Oakwood. Outside City Hall, Richard and Sarah accepted congratulations from the Oakwood residents. Douglas pushed through the crowd, his face contorted with anger. "You think you've won?" he snarled, moving toward Sarah. "This isn't over. I'll make sure everyone knows." Two police officers stepped forward. "Mr. Parker, step back, please. I'm just having a conversation," Douglas protested. "You're violating a restraining order," one officer said. "Mr. Mitchell's legal team filed it this morning based on your documented threats and harassment." As the officers led Douglas away in handcuffs, he shouted threats over his shoulder. Sarah and Richard stood on the City Hall steps, watching the police car drive away. "Thank you for speaking up," Richard said quietly. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Sarah replied. "Douglas was wrong about you. You've changed." For the first time in years, they smiled at each other without reservations or painful history between them. Morning sunlight filled Sarah's office at West Haven Hospital as she organized patient files. 3 weeks had passed since the city council meeting. Douglas Parker had been formally charged with harassment and violating the restraining order. With him out of their lives, the residents of Oakwood Apartments were embracing their improved living conditions. Sarah's desk phone rang. "Pediatrics Department, this is Sarah Mitchell." "Ms. Mitchell, Dr. Chen would like to see you when you have a moment," the voice on the other end said. In Dr. Chen's office, Sarah sat nervously. Had she made a mistake in her first month? "Sarah, I wanted to tell you personally," Dr. Chen began. "The parent satisfaction surveys from last week were excellent. Several families specifically mentioned how you made them feel welcome and helped navigate their insurance questions." "Thank you," Sarah said, relief washing over her. "I'm really enjoying the work." "It shows," Dr. Chen smiled. "We're lucky to have you." On her lunch break, Sarah called Tanya with an idea. "What if we organized a community barbecue at Oakwood? Now that everything's settled with Douglas, it could be a fresh start for everyone." "That's perfect," Tanya exclaimed. "I'll bring it up at the next tenant council meeting." That afternoon, Richard stood at the Elm Street lot where his development project would soon begin. Construction equipment was already in place, and workers were preparing the ground. His project manager, Mike Foster, unrolled the blueprints on a portable table. "We can start foundation work next week if the permits come through on time." "Make sure we prioritize the affordable units," Richard instructed. "I want those completed first." "Will do," Mike nodded. "By the way, that reporter from the West Haven Gazette wants to interview you about the project." Richard hesitated. "Schedule it for next Thursday, but I have to leave by 4 o'clock for my son's baseball game." "Family first," Mike smiled. "Got it." At West Haven Middle School, Mrs. Baker handed back math tests. She paused at Ethan's desk. "Excellent work, Ethan," she said quietly. 92%. Ethan stared at his test in surprise. His grades had been improving steadily over the past month. Later that day, in the school counselor's office, Mrs. Peterson reviewed the twins' progress with Sarah. "Both boys are doing much better," Mrs. Peterson noted. "Noah's nightmares have stopped, and Ethan's participating more in class. They seem happier at home too," Sarah said. "Having a stable routine helps." "And how are they adjusting to their father being back in their lives?" Sarah considered this. "Noah welcomed him immediately. Ethan is more cautious, but he's warming up." "Children are resilient," Mrs. Peterson said, "but they also need honest communication. Have you explained the new family dynamic to them?" "We're trying," Sarah replied. "It's complicated to explain that their father and I aren't getting back together, but we're committed to co-parenting." "Keep those lines of communication open," Mrs. Peterson advised. "Children thrive on clarity, even when the situation isn't what they might wish for." The following Saturday, Richard picked up the twins early. He carried fishing gear in one hand and a cooler in the other. "Where are we going?" Noah asked excitedly. "Lake Hamilton," Richard replied. "I thought we could try fishing." Ethan looked skeptical. "Do you even know how to fish?" "My father taught me when I was about your age," Richard said. "I wasn't very good at first, but I learned." At the lake, Richard showed the boys how to bait their hooks and cast their lines. Noah jumped right in while Ethan watched carefully before trying. After an hour with no catches, Noah grew restless and wandered off to explore nearby rocks. Richard sat quietly beside Ethan on the dock. "Did your dad fish a lot?" Ethan asked suddenly. Richard looked surprised at the question. Every weekend during summer, he worked in a factory all week, so fishing was his escape. "What was he like?" Ethan asked, his eyes on the water. Quiet, hard-working, not great at saying what he felt, but he showed it in other ways. "Like how?" Richard smiled at the memory. He never missed a single school event. Even when he was exhausted from work, he'd be there. And he built me a treehouse one summer, working on it every evening for a month. Ethan was silent for a moment. "Why did you leave us?" The question hung in the air between them. Richard took a deep breath. "I made a terrible mistake," he said simply. "I thought building a successful company was the most important thing. I told myself I was doing it for our family, but really, I was doing it for myself. By the time I realized what I'd lost, you and Noah and your mom had built a life without me." "Mom struggled a lot," Ethan said quietly. "She thought I didn't notice, but I did." "Your mom is the strongest person I know," Richard said, "and I'm sorry I made things harder for both of you." Ethan's fishing line suddenly went taut. "Dad, I think I got something." Richard helped him reel in a small bass. Ethan's face lit up with pride as Richard took a photo of him holding his catch. "Can we show Mom?" Ethan asked. "Absolutely," Richard replied, his heart warming at the sound of Ethan calling him Dad for the first time since his return. The next week, Noah's baseball team had their first official game. Sarah arrived early to get a good seat on the bleachers. She was surprised when Richard arrived and hesitated before sitting several rows away. As the game progressed, Noah hit a solid single to right field. Both Sarah and Richard cheered loudly. By the seventh inning, other parents had shifted around, and Richard ended up sitting just one seat away from Sarah. "He's really improved," Richard commented as Noah caught a fly ball. "He practices every day," Sarah said proudly, "even in the apartment with a soft ball when the weather's bad." When Noah's team won by 2 runs, he looked up at the bleachers, grinning at both his parents sitting together. At their next co-parenting counseling session, Dr. Martinez noted the progress. "You both seem more comfortable with each other," she observed. "What's changed?" "We're focusing on the boys instead of our past," Sarah said. Richard nodded. "And we're communicating better about expectations and boundaries." "Richard mentioned you defended him at the city council meeting," Dr. Martinez said to Sarah. "That must have been a significant moment." Sarah thought about it. "I defended the truth. Douglas was lying about both Oakwood and Richard. It meant a lot," Richard said quietly, "more than I could express at the time." The day of the Oakwood Community Barbecue arrived with perfect weather. Residents set up tables in the newly renovated courtyard. Tanya coordinated everything, assigning tasks and making sure everyone felt included. "The flowers look beautiful, Mrs. Wilson," Sarah commented, admiring the planters around the courtyard. "The gardening committee worked hard," Mrs. Wilson said proudly. "Having our input respected makes such a difference." Richard arrived with games for the children and helped Mark Johnson set up the grills. As everyone gathered, the atmosphere was festive and relaxed, a stark contrast to the tension that had pervaded the building under Douglas's management. While helping serve food, Richard's phone rang. He stepped aside to answer it. "Richard Mitchell?" "Yes, that's excellent news, thank you." He ended the call with a broad smile and sought out Sarah. "That was the city planning department," he told her. "The permits for all phases of the Elm Street project have been approved. We can move forward with the full development." "Congratulations," Sarah said sincerely. "You deserve this success." Instead of immediately announcing the news to everyone, Richard said, "I couldn't have done this without you, Sarah. Your support at the council meeting made a difference." Later that evening, as the barbecue was winding down, Tanya tapped a glass to get everyone's attention. "Before we finish today, Richard has an announcement," she said. Richard stood in the center of the courtyard. "First, I want to thank everyone for making this barbecue a success. This is what community looks like." People applauded and nodded. "I also wanted to share some news. Today I decided not to move into the downtown luxury apartment I'd leased. Instead, I've purchased a small house on Maple Street just 3 blocks from here." Sarah looked up in surprise. "I realized that being close to my sons is more important than anything else," Richard continued. "I want to be available for baseball games, homework help, and everyday moments." As the residents dispersed, Sarah approached Richard. "You bought a house near here? What about your penthouse plans?" Richard shrugged. They didn't feel right anymore. "The house is nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom with a small yard, but it's a 7-minute walk from here. The boys will be happy to have you nearby," Sarah said. "And you?" Richard asked cautiously. Sarah smiled slightly. "It's good for them to have their father in their lives consistently. That's what matters." That night, Sarah sat on the edge of Noah's bed with Ethan sitting cross-legged on the floor. "So Dad's going to live really close?" Noah asked excitedly. "Yes, just a few blocks away," Sarah confirmed. "Does this mean you guys are getting back together?" Ethan asked, watching her face carefully. Sarah shook her head. "No, honey. Your dad and I care about each other as your parents, but we aren't getting back together romantically." "Then why is he moving so close?" Ethan pressed. "Because he wants to be a real part of your lives," Sarah explained. "Not just for fun weekends, but for everyday stuff too. School projects, baseball practice, even just hanging out." "Is that okay with you, Mom?" Noah asked. Sarah nodded. "Yes, we're building a new kind of family. Not the same as before, but still a family where both your parents love you and work together to take care of you." Ethan seemed to accept this. "I had fun fishing with him." "I know," Sarah smiled. "He texted me a photo of your fish. He was really proud of you." As the twins drifted off to sleep, Sarah sat in the living room looking at her calendar. Her hospital job was going well. The twins were thriving. The apartment was finally properly maintained, and Richard was proving to be the co-parent their children deserved. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was becoming a good one. 3 months after the first community barbecue, a framed newspaper article hung in the lobby of Oakwood Apartments. The headline read, "Oakwood, a model for community-focused housing in West Haven." Sarah paused to look at it each morning on her way to work. Today was no different as she adjusted her hospital ID badge and prepared to leave for her shift. "Morning, Sarah," Mrs. Wilson called from the mailboxes. "Ready for the big day?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Sarah smiled. Today, Sarah would find out if she'd earned the promotion to Senior Administration Coordinator at West Haven Hospital. After just 3 months in her position, she had streamlined the department's scheduling system and improved patient check-in procedures. "Good luck," Mrs. Wilson said, "though I doubt you need it." Everyone at the tenant council meeting last night was saying how the hospital would be foolish not to promote you. At work, Sarah's desk was neat and organized with family photos displayed prominently. Dr. Chen called her into the office at 10 o'clock. "Sarah, your performance review is exceptional, Doctor," Chen began. "You've improved efficiency in nearly every area of our front office operations." "Thank you," Sarah said. "I've really enjoyed the work." "That's why I'm pleased to offer you the senior coordinator position," Dr. Chen continued. "It comes with a 15% salary increase and additional responsibilities managing our support staff." Sarah blinked back unexpected tears. "I accept. Thank you for this opportunity." On her lunch break, Sarah called Richard with the news. "That's wonderful," he said. "The boys will be so proud." "Speaking of the boys," Sarah said, "Ethan's art teacher called yesterday. She thinks he has real talent and suggested weekend classes at the community center." "I saw some of his drawings when he was over on Saturday," Richard replied. "They're really good. Would you mind if I enrolled him in those classes? That would be nice, thank you, Sarah said. It's not in my budget right now with Noah's baseball equipment costs. Consider it done, Richard said. And Sarah? Congratulations again on the promotion. You deserve it. At the construction site of the Elm Street development, Richard met with city officials for a progress tour. The foundation work was complete, and the first buildings were taking shape. We're impressed with your community engagement approach, Mayor Thompson told Richard. The Neighborhood Advisory Board was a particularly good touch. I learned at Oakwood that residents should have input on decisions affecting their homes, Richard explained. We've incorporated several design changes based on future residents' suggestions. After the tour, Richard's project manager approached him. 2 other developers called this week asking about our community-focused management model. Your approach is getting attention. Richard nodded. Schedule meetings with them. I want to share what we've learned. This model shouldn't be unique to our properties. At the West Haven Community Center, Ethan sat at an easel, carefully applying paint to canvas. Richard watched from the doorway, amazed at his son's concentration. Ms. Alvarez, the art instructor, approached Richard. Ethan has natural talent. He sees details others miss. His mother was an artist, Richard said quietly, before we had the twins. She put it aside to focus on family. Maybe she should join our adult classes, Ms. Alvarez suggested. We have sessions on Wednesday evenings. Later, as Richard drove Ethan home, he mentioned the idea. Would your mom like to paint again, do you think? Ethan considered this. Sometimes I see her looking at her old sketch pads. She doesn't know I noticed. Maybe we could get her art supplies for her birthday next month, Richard suggested. That's a good idea, Ethan agreed. Noah and I could save our allowance. Richard smiled at his son. Or we could collaborate on the gift. You know what supplies she'd need better than I would. At Riverside Park, Noah's baseball team was playing in the championship game. Both Sarah and Richard sat together in the bleachers, no longer keeping their distance from each other. Strike him out, Noah, Richard called as their son took the pitcher's mound. Sarah watched nervously. He's been practicing his curveball all week. When Noah struck out the batter with that very pitch, Sarah and Richard jumped up together, cheering loudly. Their hands accidentally touched as they sat back down, and neither pulled away immediately. Noah's team won 7-6, earning them the league championship. Both parents hugged him afterward, creating a moment of family unity that felt natural rather than forced. 1 week later, Sarah unwrapped her birthday present from the twins. Inside the large box was a complete set of art supplies, paints, brushes, canvases, and an easel. This is... I don't know what to say, Sarah said, touching the brushes reverently. Dad helped us pick everything out, Noah explained. But it was our idea, Ethan added quickly. Sarah looked at Richard, who stood slightly apart. Thank you, she said simply. The boys mentioned you used to paint, Richard said. I remembered how good you were. That weekend, Sarah set up a small studio corner in the living room. As the twins played video games, she started her first painting in more than 10 years, a simple landscape of the view from their apartment window. At the tenant council meeting, Mrs. Wilson presented their latest initiative. The scholarship fund has reached $5,000, she announced proudly. We can now offer 2 residents financial assistance for education. That's wonderful, Tanya said. How many applications have we received? 7 so far, Mrs. Wilson replied, including young Kevin Torres for his final year of law school. Richard, who attended meetings as the building owner but rarely spoke, nodded approvingly. This is exactly the kind of community support I hoped Oakwood would develop. After the meeting, preparations for the 2nd annual community barbecue were discussed. The event had become a symbol of Oakwood's transformation. Richard wants to make a special announcement at the barbecue, Tanya told Sarah later. He's been very mysterious about it. On the day of the barbecue, The courtyard looked even more beautiful than before. Flower planters bordered the area, and string lights were hung between trees. Residents had brought dishes representing their cultural backgrounds, creating a diverse feast. Children played on new playground equipment while adults gathered around tables, sharing food and conversation. The atmosphere was relaxed and joyful, exactly what a community should feel like. Midway through the event, Tanya called for everyone's attention. Richard stepped forward, looking slightly nervous. "Thank you all for making this second barbecue even better than the first," he began. "Oakwood has become more than just a building where people live. It's a true community." People nodded and smiled in agreement. "Today, I want to announce something special," Richard continued. "Mitchell Properties is establishing the Oakwood Foundation with an initial funding of $1 million. This foundation will help other buildings transition to community-focused management models like ours." Surprised murmurs spread through the crowd. "This building has taught me an important lesson," Richard said, his voice softening. "One that I want to acknowledge publicly today." He looked directly at Sarah, who was standing near the back of the gathering. "This building isn't just brick and mortar," he said. "It's about the community inside it. Sarah taught me that a home is built through care and commitment, not ownership. Her resilience and wisdom inspired this foundation." Sarah felt her cheeks flush as residents turned to look at her. Tanya squeezed her hand supportively. Later, as residents enjoyed dessert, Richard and Sarah found themselves sitting alone on a bench at the edge of the courtyard. "You didn't have to mention me in your speech," Sarah said quietly. "Yes, I did," Richard replied. "It's the truth. Watching you fight for this place, for our sons, for the community, it changed how I think about everything." "We've both changed," Sarah acknowledged. "For the better, I hope," Richard said. Sarah nodded. "The boys are happy. The building is thriving. We're co-parenting well. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their sons play with other children from the building. "I never expected this," Sarah admitted. "When Douglas threatened to evict us, I thought we'd lost everything." "And now?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Now I know that home isn't about the place. It's about the people who show up for each other." The following Sunday evening, Sarah's apartment was filled with the smell of roasting chicken. Richard arrived carrying a chocolate cake from the bakery downtown. "Dad!" Noah called from the living room. "Come see this new game level I unlocked." "In a minute," Richard replied, placing the cake on the counter. "I'm helping your mom first." In the kitchen, Richard and Sarah moved around each other with the easy familiarity they'd developed over months of shared family meals. "Ethan's art teacher called," Sarah mentioned as she prepared a salad. "They want to display his painting in the community center exhibition next month." "That's fantastic," Richard said, genuine pride in his voice. "My parents are visiting that week. They'll love to see his work." "How do they feel about seeing the boys again after so long?" Sarah asked. "Nervous but excited," Richard admitted. "They regret losing touch after the divorce." "The past is the past," Sarah said simply. "Family is complicated." As they sat down to dinner, the twins immediately began arguing good-naturedly about a video game strategy. Richard caught Sarah's eye across the table, and they shared a moment of quiet understanding. They had created something valuable from the ruins of their marriage. Not a conventional family, but one built on mutual respect and the shared love of their children. Outside the apartment window, the lights of Oakwood glowed warmly against the evening sky. What had begun as a desperate fight against eviction had transformed into something neither Sarah nor Richard could have imagined. A home defined not by walls and ownership, but by the connections between the people inside. In apartment 27, as laughter filled the dining room, Sarah realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, and so were her boys, her community, and the new, unconventional family they had all built together. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.